Hey guys, this is Tomato Anus. I have this run that I really want to do commentary over because it's kind of a really important run to the Fallout 4 speedrunning community, and you'll see why in a bit. But yeah, let's get started. So this is a any percent speedrun of Fallout 4, which means glitches are allowed. If that's not your cup of tea, I do have glitchless speedruns on my YouTube channel that you can go and watch, but this run will include glitches. The caveat is like you can't use console commands and you can't like have any pre-made saves. So any saves you see me loading during this speed run are saves that I made after I pressed new game, and they're all with the character that I started this run with. The first thing you're going to notice that the run is in French. That's because French is 11 seconds faster than English, and playing as the male in French is the fastest combination of gender and language. So we play as the French male. You'll notice in the top right corner, my frame rate is limited to 60. That white number, that's my frame rate. We cap it out at 60 because this game, the physics are actually tied to the frame rate. So if you have a really high frame rate, you're going to walk faster, which means you can beat the game faster. And we wanted to make sure that everyone was kind of on equal footing regardless of how good of a PC they could afford. So we made it so all runs have to be capped out at 60. This run is done on patch 1.1.30, which is the first patched version of the game. It's not the release version, it's like the very first patch that came out. But it is an official release by Bethesda. Like, it is a patch that was available to everyone at one point. It's still available using Steam, but just so you know, we're not playing on the most current patch. We're playing on one of the earlier patches because there's a couple glitches that are like possible in this patch that aren't in others. We're playing on very easy because the lower the difficulty, the quicker people die when you shoot them. So naturally, you want to play on an easy difficulty. There's no mods installed. This is vanilla game. I think that's about it for just like random things about the run in general, technical stuff. One thing that you'll notice is that my my timer on the left side, I use live split. I use DX story to limit my frame rate, and I think it's called RSS to customize what the frame rate counter looks like. But I use live split as my timer, and live split has a component that is able to read the state of the game at all times, and it's able to determine when the game is in a loading state, and the timer pauses itself every time it's in a loading state, because people with more money can buy a fancier computer and have shorter loading screens, which is just really unfair to some people who have to play on a laptop like myself. So as a community, we decided that all runs must be done with, like, your official time is your in-game time, which is your time without loads included. So anytime you see my timer pause, it's because the timer itself is currently reading the game in a loading state. So you'll see that happen at typical loading screens, and then also when I do glitches like punch warps and cover slides, you'll notice that my timer pauses, and that's because the game is rendering a lot of stuff in that time span, and that makes it so that my timer is paused because I'm technically loading. So for the stats that I picked, I'm going to get into the stats, why I picked them, or what I picked and why in a second. But I first want to explain that as soon as I leave this, as soon as I leave the house, I'm going to be running straight to the vault. And when I talk to the guard outside, I'm going to say, "Let us in, we're on the list." And if you spam E to talk to him again, right as you finish the word list, you're able to say your line again and skip his line, and you're able to run past him right away. So that saves about like 2 to 3 seconds. So let's talk about the stats that I picked. So I maxed out endurance because endurance, the more endurance you have, the slower your AP will drain while you're sprinting. And naturally, we like want to sprint as much as possible because sprinting is very fast. It's faster than just running, so we want to have as much endurance as possible. Similarly, we max out agility because the more agility you have, the more action points you have, the more AP you have, so you can sprint for longer. And then also you can use VATS more. And we do use VATS in the run, you'll see that in a bit. And then I put 1 point into intelligence to bring it up to 2. I don't want any more or any less. And the reason for this is that the more intelligence you have, the more XP you get when you discover things, like you discover a place or you kill someone. And every time you level up, your health and AP are completely refreshed. And we want to level up at a very specific time in the middle of the run, because we have a long running segment of about 5 minutes, and because it's so long to run, we would like to have a free AP bar in the middle where it just completely refreshes from a level up, as opposed to having to wait for the AP bar to like refill itself. So we have our intelligence at 2 because that perfectly times out all the XP that we get, so that we level up during that long running segment. And I'll harken back to this later on when we get to that running segment, but it's about 20-30 minutes from now, so we don't need to really worry about it. But we don't want any more intelligence than that, and we don't want any less. And then for the last 2 special points, I just dumped them into luck. That's because it's the fastest skill to dump your points into, because you just hold down and right, and it like automatically goes down to it and fills it up really quickly. There's like no other special stats that benefit us in the speedrun. I know what you're saying. Oh, why don't you take strength so you could get this perk, or perception so you can get this perk? It's because no other perks than the ones we take in this run actually speed up the run in any way. Trust me, we've tested. None of them really benefit us, so we just dump them into luck because we don't really need the special points. So right now is the first of 2 unskippable sequences in the game where we just kind of sit there and watch people. Like we have to sit here and we watch as we get frozen, and then Kellogg comes in, and spoilers, but he kills our wife Nora and takes away Sean. There's not much we can do. So during this part, like, I'm going to take the time to explain a couple glitches that we'll use throughout the run. The first is what we call either cone clipping or VLC clipping. It's up to you. I personally call it VLC clipping. And it's pretty much what we do is we grab a cone. There's several cones in the vault. We run up to them, we grab them, and then we pretty much walk into a wall while looking down and walking backwards. And the cone will push us up the wall and up into other rooms. It's a form of item clipping, which you'll see a decent amount through the game. Item clipping essentially is just like grabbing an item, looking down, walking backwards, and either just pushing yourself back up into the wall so you shoot up over the ceiling and into another room, or like you use the item to push yourself through the wall, which is less common, but it does happen. So anytime you see me having an item and looking down and like kind of turning my camera weird while walking backwards into a wall, it's because I'm clipping with the item. So that's item clipping as a whole. And then there's 2 other more major glitches that we use called punch warping and cover sliding, and they're both kind of ways to teleport or move very quickly from where we're standing to a different set of coordinates. So video games like Fallout, the way the game is able to tell where your character is at all times is it's always reading a set of coordinates. Every character has a set of coordinates like tied to them, and as you move, those coordinates change, and that's how the game's engine knows where you're standing. These 2 glitches are ways to essentially store a set of coordinates of where we were standing when we set up the glitch, and then later on we perform a trigger function, like a trigger action, that will either teleport us or like slingshot us back to those coordinates where we set up the glitch. So the first one that I set up is going to be punch warping, and you'll see me set it up coming up soon on a rad roach with a security baton. The way punch warping works is that when you attempt to melee attack something in VATS, the game has to pathfind for where you're standing at that moment to the thing that you're trying to attack with VATS, because you have to be able to like move to right next to the thing that you're trying to melee attack, because you can't melee attack something from 8 feet away. You have to be right next to it. So the game has to pathfind to try and figure out how to get you from position A to position B. And if you position yourself such that pathfinding, the game has a hard time of doing that pathfinding, because the pathfinding either puts you out of bounds or inside of an object or clips you through an object, then the game has to think for a little longer than normal about how to get you from point A to point B. And if you cancel your melee attack while the game is thinking, you'll know that the game is still thinking, because you kind of stay in a first-person state as opposed to going into third-person. As you'll see right here, I position myself between the wall and the boxes. And I don't really... it's like kind of a combination of first and third person. If I cancel my attack while it's doing that, now my coordinates are stored. And the next time I attempt to melee attack something in VATS, I'll get teleported to those coordinates, which you'll see me do in a little bit. But right now, I'm also going to set up what's called a cover slide. And the way a cover slide works is exactly how I just demonstrated. I aim around a corner right here, and I enter third person and stop aiming at the same exact time, and that stores my coordinates of where I was standing. And that time, it's instead of being tied to melee attacking something in VATS, it's tied to having my gun out while I'm in first person. So the next time I take out my gun while I'm in first person, I get slingshotted back to the coordinates of where I was standing. And punch warping and cover sliding, they're slightly different because punch warping teleports you to where you were standing, or the coordinates, whereas cover sliding slingshots you. They each have their pros and cons. Cover sliding is good because, as you're about to see, I'm going to stand on a certain rock and pull out my gun, and it'll slingshot me across the map, and while I'm getting slingshotted, I travel through Sanctuary, and that actually discovers the map location of Sanctuary, so I can fast travel to it later, rather than having to fast travel to Vault 111 and run to Sanctuary. So that saves 17 seconds because I discovered Sanctuary on this slide. Cover sliding also, it's also kind of bad in the sense that you can bump into objects along the way that throw off your trajectory, and you often die from fall damage from it. Whereas punch warping, because you get teleported straight to an object, you can't discover any objects along the way or any locations along the way. But typically it's safer because we're able to find a set of coordinates that safely land us on the ground or under the map. In which case, if we get teleported to under the map, then we get teleported back up onto the map once we fall far enough down. Which is exactly what I'm about to do right here by attempting to melee attack this raider in VATS. Right now, I'm teleported pretty much to the center of the map. You'll notice my timer is paused. That's because the timer is sensing the game in a loading state, because the game is technically loading right now. It's loading the middle of the map. And while I fall down, I spawn up right next to this big green building, which is Green Tech Genetics, which is perfect because we actually need Green Tech Genetics for later on in the game. So we discovered that fast travel location, and you might have noticed that as soon as I discovered Green Tech Genetics, I made a quick save, and that's because when I enter a sewer coming up here, I'm going to do a glitch called a load warp, but load warps take a little bit to explain, and it's not really necessary why I'm load warping right now. So right now I need to explain something else that's going on, which is getting the last quest in the game. So when I spawn in on the other side of this sewer's load zone, I'm immediately going to quit to the main menu and reload the autosave that the game made when I entered the sewer. And what this will do is actually load me in at the top of the water inside of the sewer. And it turns out that the top of the water is out of bounds because the top of the water is outside of the pipe that we were in. And if I just swim right over to this location right here and drop down, I discover the nuclear option, which is the last quest in the Fallout 4 main quest, which is perfect because the point of this any % speedrun is to beat the main quest of Fallout 4. So now we have the main quest, the last quest in it, so why don't we just go and finish it right now? Well, in order to finish it, we need to enter the Institute. And in order to enter the Institute, we need to build a teleporter. And in order to build a teleporter, we need to decode the Courser chip. And you can see where this is going. There's a long to-do list of things that we need to complete. And we pretty much have to jump through all these hoops that the game is set up for us. So we can't go finish the game right away, but at least we have a big piece of the game, a big piece of the main quest ready for us to complete. But in order to go through and jump through all these hoops that the game is set up for us quickly, we need to do some shopping first. And you may have noticed that I haven't really done any looting or gotten any caps, but luckily, because we're playing on patch 1.1.30, there's the vendor glitch that everyone rushed to do when the game first came out, but Bethesda quickly patched out. So the way the vendor glitch essentially works is, I think it's underflow. You're pretty much buying and selling a bunch of bullets in a specific order to underflow the game. I think it's underflow. I'm not sure. I'm not into computer science. I'm a chemical engineer, so I don't really know underflow versus overflow and stuff. But pretty much we're able to get infinite store credit by buying and selling bullets in a specific order. And with this infinite store credit, we're essentially going to rob her of all these valuable items we need. The first item I looked for was a biometric scanner. Unfortunately, she didn't have one, and I looked for a biometric scanner because it's required to beat the main game, or the main quest, because we need a biometric scanner when we build a teleporter later on. Luckily, there is a backup scanner we can get later on, and I'll talk about that when we get there. But some other things that I bought Buff Out, which is a random spawn on her because that increases, I bought it because it increases my endurance by 2 when I take it. I bought Jet, because Jet is required for a glitch later on because of its ability to slow down time and also increase your jump height very slightly. I bought a bunch of Radaway and Stim Packs because we need to run through the glowing sea, and we will be taking damage throughout the run. I bought Destroyer's left leg because it increases my move speed by 10%, which is good because we move faster. I bought Destroyer's chest piece because it reduces the damage I take from humans by 10%, I believe, maybe 15. So that's good because we take less damage. I stole the Fat Man and Mini Nuke because we're going to need it for negotiating later on. And then I bought all of her frag mines, I bought all of her Molotov cocktails, and I bought pipe pistols and shotguns. The reason I bought the pipe pistols were because they're good for clipping. Frag mines is because we use frag mines later on throughout the game to set up and trigger punch warps, because we can VATS attack a frag mine wherever it lies, so we can set up a punch warp anywhere. I bought the Molotov cocktails for a glitch that I'm about to do, and also for fast combat. So normally when you enter power armor, there's 2 different ways you can enter it. You either get the combat animation or the regular animation. So if I throw a Molotov cocktail as soon as I open the door to enter the Museum of Freedom, when I re-exit the Museum of Freedom at the roof next to the power armor, the cocktail will just be hitting the ground because of the way the game stores the Molotov cocktail in the air. I don't know, it's still in the air for whatever reason, just floating out there right now. Kind of like Schrodinger's cat. But when we then get to the power armor and we go to enter it, the cocktail will hit the ground and the game will consider us to be in combat again, and then we'll get the fast 3.5 second animation for entering the power armor, as opposed to an 8-second animation of us not being in combat. So it's a 4.5 second save by throwing that cocktail before we enter the Museum of Freedom. And then right here, I'm going to pickpocket Sturgis, who is a member of the Minutemen. And the reason why I shot him first is because we're not able to pickpocket him until Preston finishes a long dialogue, and by aggroing the Minutemen first, then it actually will skip all of his lines of dialogue, and I'm able to pickpocket Sturgis right away. And the item I pickpocketed off Sturgis is the Institute Relay Targeting Sequence, and that actually doesn't spawn until we get the Nuclear Option quest line, which is what we got in the sewer. And that's why we had to go to the Museum of Freedom after we went to the sewer, and we didn't just go through the Museum of Freedom as soon as we got here. And now you'll notice that I'm triggering a cover slide that I set up as I was leaving the Museum of Freedom. And the reason I'm cover sliding in the power armor right now is for 2 reasons. One, we need to get to Lexington like we just did. And the second is that power armor negates fall damage, which is perfect because like, we don't want to die when we fall. And the power armor's right here, and we need it for a different cover slide later on. So it's nice to just leave it at the fast travel point for Lexington, because we'll always remember that it's right here, and we'll spawn next to it when we fast travel here later. But as I exit the power armor, I equip my frag mines, and I'm going to run and enter the basement of Slocum Joe's, because this is actually where the loyalty quest for the railroad takes place, and we want to join the railroad. But unfortunately, it's slow to go to the railroad and then do this quest. It's faster to just do it before we even know them. So I throw this frag mine up into the corner and set up a punch warp because we're not able to attack it while it's up in the corner. So we abuse the pathfinding thing to store our coordinates up in that corner. I drop down, pop a stim pack, and then I grab Carrington's prototype right there. And Carrington's prototype is kind of bugged. You're able to drop it even though it's a quest item. And by dropping it right there, it actually updates the quest stage of Tradecraft to a point where we're able to just join the railroad. They trust us now. We just completed the quest where we were supposed to go through the switchboard, which is the location we were just in, with Deacon, which is really cool because now we can just go to the railroad and join them, and Deacon he'll act like he and I have been buddies forever. When I spawn in here, what I'm going to do then is mash 4 to equip my pistol, because I don't have my scanner yet, and there is a chance that a turret that we run by right here can drop a biometric scanner if we shoot it, and kill it. So Unfortunately, in this run, I did not get the scanner, so it's like a 3-second time loss to trying to farm it off this turret real quick. But luckily, there is a guaranteed drop for a scanner later on that loses us 8 seconds to grab. But the reason, like, it's nicer to get it right here and only take a 3-second time loss, but you're rolling the dice by doing this as opposed to going straight for the one later on that loses 8 seconds. But pretty much our goal right now is to go to the Old North Church and meet up with the Railroad. Because the Railroad is the faction that we'll side with at the end of the game, like I mentioned earlier. And luckily we just did the loyalty quest, so they'll accept us. And we have to say hi to the statue of Paul Revere. Papa Paul bless. He's the father of speedrunning. Wouldn't be here without him. But we're going to drop a shotgun real quick once we get inside. Use this to clip down into the basement. And for whatever reason, the railroad think it's perfectly normal for dude to drop from the ceiling. And I guess they just stand here all day with the lights on waiting for someone to walk in. But we're going to talk to Desdemona. And Deacon will vouch for us and say, hey, he's got to be someone. He made it down here, so he must be cool. He must be some sort of like good guy, because he followed the Freedom Trail, even though we didn't. But now we're pretty much going to go through this conversation with Des, where we talk about synths real quick. We acknowledge that we know they exist. And now we're going to talk to Deacon twice. The first one is the dialogue he's supposed to say while you, like, right when you finish the switchboard quest. And he's going to say, alright, let's meet back up at the Catacombs, which is the Railroad HQ. And you're like, alright. And then right away, we just walk backwards a little bit and hit a trigger to start the next dialogue with Desdemona and Deacon, which is us joining the Railroad. And then right away, I set up a cover slide on a brick wall right there, and then I made a hard save right before entering the Railroad HQ. And I'll explain in a little bit why I made the Railroad HQ hard save. Because that has to do with load warping, and I'll explain load warping very soon. But right when we got into the other side of the Railroad HQ and actually discovered it, I pulled up my map, pulled up the perk chart, and I leveled up Action Boy and Solar Powered. I've leveled up Action Boy because it increases the regeneration rate of your action points by 25%, which is good because you can sprint for longer. And I leveled up Solar Powered because I believe it's during the hours of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It increases your endurance and strength by 2. And we want more endurance during the daylight hours because we can sprint for longer. And then I do this fast travel to Lexington and back for 2 reasons. One is that it skips Desdemona's long welcome to the railroad. It may lack the amenities we need, whatever line that she goes through. And also, it offsets the day-night cycle just enough so that right now when we're about to do a long running segment, we have it's going to be daytime, which means that we'll be like under the effects of solar powered and we'll be able to sprint for longer than normal. And now what we're going to do is go to Diamond City, and kind of pretty like I think right now is when you can consider us to begin our I'd say right now we're still setting up. After the radiation split is when we're kind of going to begin to like just plow our way through the main quest. We're still setting things up right now. But I'm going to walk up to Diamond City, and instead of going in the normal way and having to go through that dialogue with Piper and Mayor McDonough, we're instead going to clip through the back with a cone. We're going to do a VLC clip, and we're going to enter Diamond City that way. And because we entered Diamond City without going through that dialogue, the game automatically says, hey, something went wrong. He skipped the dialogue. Just skip it with him. So it completely skips that dialogue of Piper and Mayor McDonough. Like, they're done talking, and Piper will be re-entering the city. And then as soon as I enter, the first thing I'm going to do is walk up a little bit and trigger my cover slide so that I can get slingshotted to right next to Nick's detective agency. And the reason I need to go here now is for 2 reasons. One is to make a hard save for load warping, which I'll explain very shortly, I promise. And the second is to enter Nick's agency and leave. And the reason I need to enter Nick's agency and leave is this essentially hits a trigger to move Nick to Vault 114, which is where you're supposed to rescue him from. And then, for whatever reason, if you come back here later after you kill Kellogg, you're supposed to talk to Nick before you kill Kellogg. But if you kill Kellogg before you talk to Nick, and you've entered Nick's agency once, then if you go straight to the agency again and talk to Nick, then, or if you go straight to the agency again right after killing Kellogg, Nick will spawn inside of the agency as opposed to inside of Vault 114, so we never actually have to go and rescue Nick. One thing you'll also notice is that right here, Piper will still be outside, and this is very important because of the fact that Piper never enters Diamond City and is inside of Diamond City at the same time as we are yet. So that means that Piper hasn't triggered like the quest stage in her dialogue of talking with Mayor McDonough. That quest isn't to the stage where she's supposed to walk to her office yet. Pretty much as soon as Piper enters Diamond City at the same time as you, then also there's a flying car there, some wasteland wonkiness, but as soon as you are in Diamond City at the same time as Piper, the game says, okay, Piper, go to your office right now. And we abuse that fact later on by, like, when we talk to Nick and Piper. And you'll see later on. I'll continue explaining later. But let's talk about load warping right now. It's this thing that I've continually been bringing up because it plays a huge part in the speedrun. And it's a big reason as to why we're able to go so fast. Sorry, I'm taking a drink of water. So, load warping has several components to it, and I need to first break down and kind of fill you in on the terminology. So this game has two types of saves, right? There's quick saves, and then there's normal saves that you make from the menu. Quick saves are the ones you just press the button for, and then you can quick load. You can only have one quick save stored at a time. Every time you quick save, you overwrite your last one. And then there's also hard saves, which are always there. It's in a list when you press load, and you can go and load any of them. Additionally, every time you open a door to enter a new building, or you enter a cave to enter, or you walk into a cave entrance to enter a cave, or anything like that, then there's a brief fade to black where you kind of lose control of your character and you're entering the loading screen. It's essentially the game's way of transitioning you to the load screen in a way that both looks good and it also prevents player movement while the game is loading, so that the player can't clip through walls by quick save, quick load spamming like you see in Fallout 3 and New Vegas. So if you make a quick save, say I made a quick save right now, and then I loaded an old save, say the one in Old North Church, and I opened that door and pressed quick load with a timing that was very precise so that the quick load registers as soon as the fade to black starts, then I'll actually stay in the position of the character who is entering the railroad, but I'll be the character from the quick save. So I'll be the character who has already discovered Diamond City and is currently taking radiation, but I'll spawn inside of the railroad HQ. So essentially, it's a way for us to make quick saves and then take the character from the quick save and teleport them to the location of a hard save that we've already made. And on top of this, this means that you maintain all the progress you've made. So if I were to load warp right now with this character to Old North Church, I would be inside of the Railroad HQ, and I would also have Diamond City discovered. And also I would have all the health and AP that I have at that moment that I made the quick save. Also right here is the level up I talked about earlier. Notice how my AP bar completely refreshed as I ran out. That's what we were gunning for. That's what we wanted to refresh our AP to get a free AP bar of sprinting during this long running segment. Anyways, I digress. When you load warp, you maintain the HP and AP of the character from the quick save. So that's why right when I landed next to Green Tech Genetics and discovered it, I made a quick save so that the quick save had the character who had just discovered Green Tech Genetics with a full HP bar and a full AP bar. And then I sprinted past a bunch of raiders and took a bunch of damage and lost a bunch of AP. And then I load warped while I entered the sewer. And by doing that, when I spawned inside of the sewer, I was a character with full HP and full AP. And it's essentially just a way to refill our AP bar by just doing a load warp. So that's pretty much load warps in a nutshell. Let's talk about this cover slide that I just set up. So imagine the map as a square, because that's essentially what it is. If we were to set up a cover slide in the bottom left corner, and then travel to the top right corner, and trigger a cover slide, then the game will want to slingshot us back to the coordinates of the bottom left corner. Similarly, if we set up a cover slide in the bottom left corner and then travel to the top. Also, I just grabbed the scanner here. This is the 8-second time loss. Grabbing the scanner right here. It's just a slight detour. Anyways, if I were to set up a cover slide in the bottom left corner, travel to the top left corner, and trigger my cover slide, I'll slide down the left side of the map, which is exactly what we are setting up right now. So right after an encounter with a rad scorpion about a minute ago, I set up a cover slide on a rock, and essentially now what I'm going to do is fast travel to I'll fast travel to Lexington first and pick up our power armor so we don't take fall damage in this cover slide, and then I'll fast travel to Vault 111 where I'll trigger a cover slide and slide down the left side of the map. I make a hard save right outside of Virgil's cave so we can load warp to here later. Pretty much any time you see me loading a hard save, it's me performing a load warp, and it's me traveling to the location of the hard save as the character from the quick save. So anytime you see me loading an old save, it's a load warp. But anyways, I mash E during the fade in, and I'll be entering the power armor as I gain control of my character. And then I fast travel to Vault 111, and then I'll be entering third person and taking out my gun and tabbing into the Pip-Boy a lot because the Pip-Boy counts as first person. So if I'm in third person with my gun out, the cover slide won't trigger, but if I enter the Pip-Boy, the cover slide will trigger a little bit because I enter and exit it really quickly. It's just a different way of triggering a cover slide, as opposed to just being in first person and taking out our gun. Doing it this way gives us a little more distance, but the distance varies a lot. But pretty much my goal right now is to slide down the left edge of the map, since we set it up in the bottom left corner and triggered it in the top left. We're trying to slide down the left edge of the map and stop halfway at Fort Hagen, which is where Kellogg is. And we want to get to Kellogg because Kellogg is a plot point, and we need to talk with Kellogg in order to advance the main quest. So right here I'll be landing my cover slide, and luckily we got an amazing cover slide. This cover slide is really inconsistent, and it leaves a lot up to chance. But I'm just going to jump right up here, and normally you're not supposed to be able to get to Kellogg, but we're able to kind of enter through the back door by just dropping a pipe pistol and then grabbing it and doing a horizontal gun clip. It's just a type of clipping, just a type of clip right through that door, and then enter the elevator. I'm just going to prepare myself really quickly to talk to Kellogg, and then I'm going to drop another weapon to item clip again. So I drop one more pipe pistol, and like I said before, we're not supposed to be able to get to Kellogg, but when you incorporate item clips, you're able to get to him pretty dang fast. So just going to grab the pipe pistol, back up against this corner of a bookshelf. I think it's a locker actually, and just take out my fat man and talk with Kellogg really quickly, and then loot the necessary items off him that are required to complete the main quest. Grab a military grade circuit board, view the access logs, make a quick save, and then we're going to load our save in Diamond City because we're going to load warp to Nick's agency. So as I said before, ad nauseum, like, we're going to load warp and we'll be the character who just killed Kellogg, but will be inside of Nick's detective agency. And I do this by opening the door and pressing quick save shortly after. The timing has to be really, really, really close to perfect because there's a very small margin for error here. And as soon as I enter, normally Piper's saying to Nick, "Come on, Nicky," stuff like that. But we're able to skip her entire dialogue, saving about 6 to 8 seconds here because of the fact that I mentioned earlier. The quest stage of Piper and Mayor McDonough's dialogue, where Piper needs to walk to her office, hadn't triggered yet. But now that we're in Diamond City with Piper at the same time, Piper's quest stage is now trying to tell her to go to her office. So she's not going to take part inside or in that dialogue with Nick because she's supposed to be walking to her office, and the game is just trying to figure out what she's supposed to do at that moment, so she just doesn't talk. So we talk with Nick right there, progress the main quest a little bit. We're now going to fast travel to Good Neighbor because that's where the memory den is, and we need to go through Kellogg's memories. Now, this upcoming sequence, I have a $250 bounty out for anyone who can complete this, like find a way to skip this sequence in a way that can be applied to any percent to make the run faster. Because it's a really long walking segment followed by sitting there for 2 minutes doing nothing. And it's really boring. Also, I should mention now, the reason why we didn't just punch warp or cover slide through the glowing sea to get to Virgil's cave to make that hard save is because we can only punch warp and cover slides to coordinates that we've already been to, and the coordinates of the glowing sea are so extreme that there's no other place in the game that has coordinates that line up with the glowing sea. So we're not able to just punch warp through it. Anyways, in the memory den, we're going to talk with Amari right quick, and we're pretty much going to give her Kellogg's brain chip or whatever that we looted off of him. That's the thing that I needed to make sure I picked up off of him. And while she's installing that, I'm going to set up a punch warp in this corner, and I'm going to run up to the main entrance. And if I exit the main entrance right after Amari starts a certain line or finishes a different line, depending on how you look at it, I'm just waiting for the right timing. If I exit and re-enter, then it'll skip all of Amari's lines of installing the chip into Nick's head. And in order to get back down to the basement quickly to talk to her, I'm going to trigger my punch warp on this drifter in the memory lounger real quick. And that drifter is actually Deacon if you look closely. But he's labeled as drifter when he's inside of there. He's in disguise. I'm going to finish this dialogue with Amari real quick. And then I'm actually going to shoot her to aggro her. But I'm not going to down her right away. She's tagged as essential, so she can't be killed yet. But what I wanted to do was shoot her to aggro her. And then from her aggroing to me, Nick will aggro to her, because Nick is our companion during this quest. And if I get Nick to aggro to her, and then Nick and I down her, then it abuses a script between the de-aggroing of Nick and Amari, so that as soon as we sit down into the memory lounger, the game immediately fades to white, like you might have noticed it did. Typically there's like a 30-second dialogue there that is unskippable, but if you do the series of events as I just described, then it'll skip Amari's dialogue, and you'll save about 27 seconds because you have to account for the time that you were shooting her. But right now is part of the part that we hate so much. It's like a minute 20 of just walking over all these, I think they're called neurons, I'm not sure, I'm not a biology guy, but walking through pretty much Kellogg's memories to see what made him the person he was. Pretty cool story moment, but really bad gameplay moment because it's just really boring when you're trying to go fast. So we just pretty much beeline straight to the finish. There actually is a way to skip this walking segment, but the setup for it is so long that it isn't really applicable in a normal run. So we don't do it, but there is a way that we've discovered. A runner named Brongle discovered it. He finds so much crazy stuff, him and Gingenia, but he discovered a way to skip this entire walking segment, but it's slightly slower to set up than it is to actually just walk the segment. So we just walk the segment still. But then after walking for about a minute 20, we just jump right up here, and we kind of have to wait for another 2 minutes while Kellogg talks with X688 and Sean, and pretty much it's supposed to be this big moment where you realize, oh my god, that's why no one's found the Institute, because there's no entrance. They're underground. Maybe you don't know they're underground yet, but everyone just teleports everywhere. And this is is what's supposed to open up the game. This is where the game's supposed to expand a ton, because you will have just met the Brotherhood, and also this is where you suddenly have a very tangible goal of teleport into the Institute, right? And really the Institute is where the game really opens up. You're about halfway through the game then, but in a casual playthrough, that is, not in a speed run. But this is supposed to be where you're supposed to have an actual tangible goal, and you see your son here, so you're oh my god, I'm actually close, you know? But unfortunately this scene is kind of the most hated thing in the speed run, because of you're just sitting here doing nothing. And we've done so much experimentation to try and find a way to skip this segment, but to no avail. We haven't figured out a way to do it. It's crazy the measures Bethesda went through just to make sure you couldn't get out of this part. It's hats off to them. It seems impossible, but you never know. But that's why I put out a $250 bounty on finding a way to skip this that saves time and is applicable in an any % run. Once we get out of this memory sequence, then what we're immediately going to do is shoot Amari, and we're not going to just pull out our gun and shoot her. We're going to mash VATS because that's the quickest way to actually shoot her, is to use VATS. We're going to use VATS to shoot her, and that will actually make it so it skips all of her dialogue because she aggroes to us immediately, and by skipping all of her dialogue it immediately advances the quest line that makes Virgil spawn, and Virgil's a very important player in the main quest because he's like a key component in teleporting into the Institute because he's the one who actually gives us the plans to teleport. So right away I shoot Amari to make Virgil spawn because the quest advances enough, and then I'm immediately going to make a quick save and load the hard save from right outside of Virgil's cave, and then I'll immediately load warp into Virgil's cave. So then I'll be the character who just went through all the memories, and I'll be inside of Virgil's cave. So now this next story beat is that we know that they teleport, but we need to figure out how to teleport into the Institute. So we talk with Virgil, who is an ex-Institute scientist who has turned super mutant. Don't really understand why a dude thinks it's a good idea to hide in the glowing sea, which is like fends off people because of the radiation when you're trying to hide from a bunch of robots. That doesn't really make sense to me, but whatever floats your boat. But pretty much we talk with Virgil, and he says, oh, a way you can teleport into the Institute is by getting a Courser chip. That'll pretty much allow for you to hone in on the Institute's coordinates or whatever and teleport into them. Virgil had a slight dialogue lock up here, losing about 9 seconds. Pretty unfortunate, but stuff happens, you know. But yeah, pretty much now our goal is to go and kill a Courser. Luckily for us, the place where the Courser spawns is Green Tech Genetics, which I'm not sure if you remember, but that's right where we landed really early on when we did our first punch warp. So we already have Green Tech Genetics discovered. It's that big ugly green building, so all we have to do now is exit Virgil's cave and then just fast travel straight to Green Tech Genetics. And Green Tech Genetics is a pretty cool sequence in the game. There's lots of combat that you're supposed to do there, but fortunately for us, we really just have to we grab a garbage can and use it to climb up a couple walls, and then we set up a punch warp and we make a beeline to the elevator, because at the top of the elevator there's a Courser that we need to talk with. If you don't know, Coursers are pretty much like the hitmen of the Institute. They don't always like kill people, but they like do all the dirty work for the Institute, and they're like the most feared people in the wasteland. But we need to talk to one real quick to try and convince him to give us his Courser chip. But he's all the way at the top of Green Tech Genetics, so as I said before, the first thing that we do is we grab a garbage can, which as soon as it finishes loading, you'll see me do. So grab this garbage can, run over to some collapsed stairs real quick, glide ourselves up, accidentally bonk a wall, glide ourselves up another wall, and once we're up here, we're going to use a fragment to set up a punch warp right here, store coordinates, and then just run upstairs and enter an elevator that was luckily open. It's like a quarter of a second time save, half a second time save to have the elevator already open. But we stored our punch warp at a location that was kind of high up off the ground, and that's pretty nice because we need to go high up again in this segment right here. You're supposed to run up a bunch of stairs, or you could item climb up a giant fenced wall in the middle, but instead we can just punch warp, drop down and talk with the Courser real quick, and as soon as we talk with him we can just take his Courser chip like that, quick save, and we're going to now load warp to Old North Church, because now that we have the Courser chip, the next story beat is to decode it so that we can actually tell where the Institute is. So I open the door, quick save, or not quick save, quick load. It would be catastrophic if I quick saved right there. I quick load to be the character who now has the Courser chip, and I'll be inside of the Railroad HQ. And now that I'm here, I need to talk with Desdemona and pretty much say, hey, I have a Courser chip, can we decode it? And she's like, yeah, we have the perfect man for the job. And that's where you meet Tinker Tom. Also, while I'm here, I'm going to be grabbing a bunch of random items for scrap for building the teleporter very soon. But pretty much Desdemona has a long dialogue sequence, but if we just sleep for an hour, we skip all of it. And we're able to shoot these guys, skip a couple dialogue lines because they're technically considered like part of our faction right now. So we can shoot them up to 4 times before they'll aggro. On the 5th shot is when they're going to aggro. So we can shoot them to skip a couple dialogue lines. And we just met Tinker Tom, who in French sounds like a Sims character. But he has a lot of dialogue to go through at this moment, but we're able to skip it by just fast traveling to the railroad HQ, which is where we already were. But if we just fast travel to it, exit, and re-enter, then when we walk through the other side, Tom should hopefully be on the correct dialogue line that we can load warp out on to have advanced the quest. Grab a couple things for scrap. Run up to Tom to hear it, because sometimes the subtitles don't register. But he was saying a line where he says solve for N, and that's the line that we need him to be on. So I made a quick save and immediately loaded the save right outside of Virgil's cave, because now we need to go and talk with Virgil again. Because now Virgil will give us the plans for the teleporter now that we've decoded the Courser chip. And when we have the plans for the teleporter, we're kind of going to make a deal with Virgil and say, hey, if you give us the teleporter plans and whatnot, we'll find you your serum inside of the Institute so that you can become human again. He's like, spoiler alert, we actually don't help out Virgil in the speedrun. That would be a little slow. But yeah, we get the plans from him, and then right away, as soon as the quest update pops up right there, we make a quick save and then load our Old North Church save again. Because we're going to load warp back into the Institute. It's faster to load warp here as opposed to leaving and then fast traveling back to the HQ. So I just load warp back in, and then once I'm inside, I run up to Desdemona again and say, hey, I have the plans for the teleporter. Can we do something about this? She says, sure, talk with Tom. So then I'll go and talk to Tom, as you'll see in a moment. And essentially he'll say, alright, you need to build this platform, and you need to build it at like kind of a base you have. And luckily, as I mentioned so long ago, grab these things for scrap real quick. As I mentioned so long ago, we discovered Sanctuary on the very first cover slide, which is where we're going to build it. Normally at this point, if you didn't have Sanctuary, you would need to fast travel to Vault 111 and then run to Sanctuary, and that loses you 17 seconds. And I need to drop a military grade circuit board right here, because the military grade circuit board, the game will automatically scrap it for 5 circuitry if you need circuitry to build something. And we do have other items for circuitry, but the game will pick the military grade circuit board over those items to scrap, and we actually need the military grade circuit board itself when we're building the teleporter coming up. So we build this first stage of the teleporter, which is the stabilizer platform, is I think what it's called. And we fast travel back to the HQ, where we're going to grab the circuit board again that we had just dropped and talk with Tom. And Tom will pretty much give us the final plans. And now that we have the circuit board again, we can build these final components. But Tom will give us the final plans for the teleporter. We'll be able to complete the teleporter building process, talk with Desdemona, and then teleport to the Institute. Building the teleporter right here, it's actually, personally, it's my favorite part of the run. I think it's the most fun. Every runner kind of builds the teleporter in a different style. Everyone has their like preferred patterns to build it. This is just my own. I like going in a circle with the power generators. Connect everything with the power lines. But pretty much once it's done building, then I talk with Desdemona. Shooter wants to skip a line that she started up that I didn't need her to say. And then once I'm done talking with her, normally once I step onto the platform, Tinker Tom has a really long dialogue where he's like, alright, firing it up, stuff like that. But if I pull up the map, as soon as he finishes a line, after like he'll always be talking while you're off of the platform. And as soon as you step onto the platform and he finishes a line, then the game will lock you in place on the platform. But if you step onto the platform and pull up the map as soon as he finishes the line that would lock you in place, and then you fast travel away, then it'll skip all of his lines and it'll immediately teleport you into the Institute, which is really cool. But this is also where the game gets really messy. So we're in the Institute, right? We're doing this whole thing with the railroad. We load the holotape, expecting the railroad to come through, and we're gonna save the day with the railroad. We're gonna destroy the Institute. But who other than Preston Garvey shows up instead? And from him we're gonna get the fusion pulse charge to place on the reactor. To blow up the Institute, but the reason why he comes in and not the railroad is because, one, we stole the targeting sequence, or the targeting relay off of Preston, or no, Sturgis. Also, I set up a punch warp here and set up a hard save for load warping. But pretty much when we got that quest, nuclear option in the sewer, it gave it to us. It gave us the quest in the middle of the quest line. Wait 1 second. I'm going to show, right here I just did a jet jump, which is the reason why we need a jet. It extends our jump just slightly by jumping a little higher and slows down time so we can access this door way down here. But anyways, when we got the nuclear option quest line so long ago, it gave it to us in the middle. But because of the way that quest is set up, you were supposed to be able to complete it with 3 people, those three factions, with those 3 factions being Minutemen, Railroad, Brotherhood. But because we got it in the middle, the game didn't know who to assign it to us with, so it kind of assigns it to us with both the Railroad and the Minutemen. So we're completing the game with both the Railroad and the Minutemen right now. And I trigger my punch warp, I set up my cover, or not set up my cover slide, I make a quick save, and then load my Old North Church save right away, because after we set the bomb on the reactor, now we need to go and talk with the Railroad. Typically, Desdemona gets teleported into the Institute here, and she says, like, Tom, bring us back, stuff like that, but it's kind of bugged out, and if we go to the Railroad HQ, she'll actually be inside of there, and we can skip all of her lines saying, Tom, bring us back, by just shooting her to aggro really quickly, and then putting away our guns so they forgive us immediately, and this will teleport us back into the Institute. Like I said, there's a lot going on right now on the internal side of this quest, and the game is just trying to connect a bunch of strands right now. But as soon as I teleport back into the Institute, I quick save again, I load the Old North Church save one last time, and I load warp into the Railroad HQ one last time, because I need to talk with Tinker Tom really quickly. And excuse me. When I talk with Tom, I need to wait for him to finish certain lines. He's going to say, this kid just showed up. They say he's Fixer's son, stuff like that. I need to wait for him to finish these lines. I could shoot him, but I wanted to play it safe. So I talk with Tom, say fire it up, and as soon as I finish that line, the quest stage updates. I quick save, and I load the Institute save, because I now need to load warp back into the Institute and get teleported to the Mass Fusion Executive Suite, which is where the detonator is for the bomb to blow up the Institute. So I actually missed the load warp right here. It's only fitting that the only load warp I missed is like the one really easy one that is with a door, and it's the last one in the game, but luckily I was able to hit it going back the other way, so didn't really lose too much time there. But it's only fitting that the one missed load warp is the last one. But now the game is pretty much done. All I have to do is step onto the teleporter area right here, and I'll get teleported to the Mass Fusion Executive Suite, and I hit the button and watch the fireworks. But yeah, this is Fallout 4 any percent full game. And if you haven't been able to figure out by now, the reason why I said at the beginning this run is so monumental is because it's the very first 39-minute run. The very first run under 40 minutes that anyone has achieved for this game. I put in a lot of work with this game over the past year since I started running, and so have a lot of other people in our community. A lot of people spend hours just like looking into things in the game, trying to figure out how things work, trying to find all those little time saves. The people who have found the most time save in the past year to help make this possible are Gingenia and Brongle, the 2 dudes I mentioned earlier. They found the most time save out of anyone in the past year. Yeah, 39:45, accounting for the late timer at the start and the late timer at the end right here, and the early timer at the start. It's like a 39:45.41. But yeah, this is Fallout 4 in under 40 minutes.
I can feel it wash over me. The heat, the force, the radiation, the fear. It's the end of the world all over again. I close my eyes. I see my life before all of this. Before the bombs. Everything can change in an instant, and the future you plan for yourself shifts, whether or not you're ready. At some point, it happens to all of us. This wasn't the world I wanted, but it was the one I found myself in. The Commonwealth. My home. Ripped apart and put back together. I hoped I could find my family, cheat time, make us whole again. The way we were. But now I know. I know I can't go back. I know the world has changed. That the road ahead will be hard. This time, I'm ready. Because I know war. War never changes.